You and I. We've both worn clothes for a little too long, haven't we? A day passed fresh, maybe two. You remember the faint itch at the waistband, the smell you think no one else notices, the stiffness of fabric that's supposed to bend. It is a small private shame in the modern world, the kind you can wash away with hot water, scented detergent, and a dash of denial. But in 1942, shame had no soap and underwear. Underwear was not a daily choice. It was a sentence. Picture it. Europe choking on winter, the kind of winter that makes your teeth feel hollow when you breathe. Men, barely more than boys, pressed into wool and khaki and canvas. They marched in it. They bled in it. They slept in it. And the layer that touched their skin most intimately, the cotton briefs or the long johns issued to them by a government that counted bullets by the crate, but underwear by the season. That layer almost never left their bodies. Weeks turned into months, and the fabric became something else. Not clothing, not even cloth. It became a living, breathing thing, stiff in the cold, oily in the heat, stained in ways no daylight should see. It carried the smell of the man who wore it, but also the war itself. Gunpowder, damp earth, mold, the sweet sick perfume of rot and unwashed skin. You have to understand, soldiers didn't change underwear. They rotated hell. If you were lucky, supply lines reached your trench or your outpost with crates of socks and a handful of clean undershirts. But underwear? Often, the army believed 2 pairs per man was more than enough for an entire year. Enough meant 1 on your body, 1 in your pack. The spare would only touch you if the one you wore disintegrated, or if you caught lice so bad your skin blistered. And those months. Oh, the months did strange things to the human body. Chafing became sores. Sores became open wounds. Sweat and bacteria formed a marriage no soldier could annul. Some men joked about it, called it wearing my lucky pair, as if luck could be stitched into a waistband. But the joke never lasted long. Not when the nights were silent, except for the sound of men scratching themselves raw in the dark. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't stubbornness. It was survival. Because to peel off that single protective layer meant exposing yourself to the cold, to the eyes of others, to the smell that would make even your closest friend turn away. Privacy was rare, warmth even rarer. And water? In the front lines, water was for drinking, if you could get it. Washing was a luxury that belonged to another life, the one they'd left behind. The fabric would cling to you in the damp, grow stiff in the dry, and in time, mold itself to your body like a second skin, one that didn't care for comfort or dignity. Some men swore the cloth, remembered them, holding the imprint of every night slept in frozen mud, every mile marched under a merciless sun, every hour spent waiting for the enemy to show his face. That underwear carried history, and it carried filth. And sometimes the two were indistinguishable. Do you want to know the truth? It wasn't just the stink. It wasn't just the dirt. It was the intimacy of it, because underwear is the most private garment a person owns. It touches places we keep hidden from the world. In peace, it's the fabric of lovers, of soft mornings and careless youth. In war, it becomes a witness, a silent archivist of the human body under siege. Every stain, every tear, every hardened patch of sweat salt was a story written in flesh and cotton. But here's the cruel twist. By the 3rd month, most men couldn't remember what clean felt like. They forgot the feeling of cloth that moved easily, that smelled of nothing. The dirty became normal. The filth became familiar. And when that happens, you stop fighting it. You wear it like you wear the war. A thing you can't take off. A thing you carry until something, somewhere, finally kills you or sets you free. And yet, there's a kind of dark poetry to it, isn't there? The idea that a strip of cotton could endure what a man endures, could travel from foxhole to field hospital to barracks and back again, could see more death than a priest and more flesh than a lover. could know the weight of fear pressed between a man's thighs as he crouches in a ditch, waiting for a shell to land. It makes you think about the word uniform. We imagine soldiers dressed alike, identical in appearance. But the truth was, under the neat line of coats and belts and rifles, each man wore a private war, stitched in his own sweat. And that war, that war was filthy. We live in a world now where a pair of underwear can be replaced in minutes. You tear it, buy another. You soil it, wash it. Back then, underwear was issued like a dog tag. It was property of the army. And when the army runs low, you don't get new. You get told to make do. And make do was a phrase that soldiers learned to hate. Because make do meant wearing the same cotton cage until it became part of your skin. There's something almost medieval about it, isn't there? A reminder that progress in weapons doesn't always mean progress in comfort. That the same armies who dropped bombs with mathematical precision couldn't manage to keep their men in clean undergarments. That a man could fire a rifle at 1,000 yards, but couldn't get a clean waistband around his hips. I could tell you it was about supply lines. I could tell you it was about rationing cotton for bandages, about factories prioritizing parachutes over boxer shorts. And all of that would be true. But the deeper truth, the one that creeps under your own skin as you think about it, is that human bodies, when pushed far enough, adapt to filth. And once they adapt, something inside shifts. You become a different creature. One that accepts things you would have once sworn you never could. And so, in that winter of 1942, in that summer of 1944, in that mud of every nameless battlefield, there were men who fought not just the enemy in front of them, but the slow, crawling enemy under their own clothes. They fought the rash that burned between their thighs, the stink that stuck to their fingers when they adjusted their waistband, the knowledge that the fabric touching their most private places had been with them longer than their rations, longer than their commanding officer, longer than some of the friends now buried in shallow graves. So tonight, as you sit in your clean clothes, in a chair you chose, in a room that smells of nothing more than the life you built, I want you to imagine, truly imagine, what it would be to strip yourself of all that, to be issued one pair of underwear, to wear it day after day until the days blur, to feel it stiffen, sour, and bite into your skin, to sleep with it, march with it, fight with it, to kill with it on your body, and maybe to die with it still wrapped around you, because that is where our story begins. Underwear, in the first few weeks, still pretends to be what it once was. It stretches politely when you pull it on. It folds against you without complaint. It holds a faint scent of the soap it last met, though by now, that scent is only a ghost clinging to the threads. In the beginning, you can lie to yourself. You can believe this garment is still yours, still something you control, still a piece of home. The first days of a deployment are full of these small deceptions. The shirt that still smells faintly of a drawer instead of smoke. The boots whose leather hasn't yet taken on the shape of your desperation. The underclothes that whisper of a civilian life where laundry was a cycle, not a dream. But then the days slide by, uncounted, and the war begins to seep into your skin from the inside out. The underlayer becomes the first battlefield, the quiet front where the enemy is sweat and time and the impossibility of privacy. It begins subtly, a dampness that never dries, a little stiffness in the fabric where it presses into your thigh when you sit, the band at the waist rolling in on itself, holding the warmth of your body long after the sun has gone. At night, you feel it when you shift, a heaviness in the cloth, as though it's absorbing every restless movement, every shallow dream. By the end of the second week, it's no longer pretending to be underwear. It has begun its transformation into something else entirely, not clothing, not armor, but a living record of your decline. The truth is, the human body doesn't stay clean in war. Even if you had fresh cloth, the air alone would undo it. The dust of roads where convoys have passed is a fine, gray talc that drifts into everything. Into the folds of your skin, into your eyelashes, into the stitching at the seams of your briefs. Sweat pushes it deeper, grinding it in until it feels like part of you. Then there's the mud, not the romantic cinematic mud of a single rainstorm, but the rank, standing muck that collects in trenches and ditches, layered with oil slicks from machines and the faint shimmer of things long dead under the surface. You sit in that. You lie in that. Sometimes you crawl through that on your belly. It doesn't just touch the outer uniform. It soaks up through your knees, your hips, your spine, and reaches the cloth wrapped closest to your skin. You don't wash it out. You don't even try. Somewhere after the third week, the idea of washing becomes abstract. You could strip it off, if the weather allowed, but what then? Stand naked in the wind? Risk losing the only pair you have to a stray splash of mud or a careless boot step? Men learned early. It was safer to keep the filth you knew and risk finding new filth to take its place. And so the garment adapts to you, or maybe you adapt to it. The fabric grows heavier, the fibers stiffen, the smell turns from human to something feral, animal, a musk that clings to your fingers after you scratch at the waistband. In close quarters, a foxhole, a dugout, the belly of a transport truck, that smell becomes part of the air. You don't notice your own, not after a while. It's the smell of the man beside you that reaches you first, and it's only then you remember. You smell like that to him. There's no judgment. How could there be? In a world where you've seen a man cough blood onto his lap and still go on eating his ration biscuit, underwear is not a moral issue. It's just another thing that breaks and never gets fixed. By the second month, the body underneath begins to pay the price. The skin at the thighs starts chafe, to redden, to split. Salt from your own sweat dries in crystalline lines along your hips and between your legs. And when you move, those crystals bite into you like tiny blades. Some men tear strips from their shirts to make crude pads, trying to keep the cloth from rubbing them raw. But even those rags become part of the ecosystem, damp dark a breeding ground for whatever lives in human warmth. Fungus blooms in the creases of flesh, a slow itch that turns into a constant burn. And through it all, you keep wearing the same garment, because taking it off feels more dangerous than keeping it on. It's not the absence of soap that crushes you, though soap is a memory that belongs to another universe. It's the absence of the idea that you deserve to be clean. Cleanliness becomes a luxury you don't dare picture in detail, the way you stop picturing the bed you left behind or the street where you once knew every crack in the pavement. You live here now, in this fabric, in this stink, in this slow erosion of self. The waistband digs deeper each week, not because the fabric shrinks, but because you do. The war eats at your body from the inside, whittling away muscle, softening your belly, hollowing your cheeks, but your underwear stays the same size, holding you in like the last discipline left to you. You wake in the night with it twisted around your hips, biting into the tender skin above the bone, and you wonder, fleetingly, if it might outlive you. There is a strange companionship between man and garment in war. The rifle is obvious. It's the tool that keeps you alive. But the underwear is the witness. It is there when you crouch over a slit trench in the half-light, when you stagger out of sleep at the sound of distant shelling, when you hunch in the rain waiting for a truck that may never come. It is there when you laugh at something obscene your comrade says just to keep the silence from swallowing you both whole. It is there when you drag a wounded friend to cover, feeling the hot bloom of his blood against your thigh, seeping through wool, through cotton, through to your skin. The stain doesn't wash out. It becomes part of the record. And after a while, you stop separating your body from your clothing in your mind. They are both filthy. They are both tired. They are both waiting for a kind of release you can't name. Sometimes you dream of changing them. Not in the clean, bright way you once did, folding fresh cloth against your hips and feeling the elastic snap into place. No, you dream of peeling them away, slowly, like a second skin, feeling the air against places it hasn't touched in months. You imagine dropping them into a fire, watching them curl and blacken, hearing the faint hiss as the dampness burns away. But you always wait before you can. And in the gray half-light, with your knees drawn up to keep warm, you realize that even if you had a fire, you'd probably keep them. Because they are yours, in the way nothing else is anymore. That is the first truth the first months teach you. War strips you of possessions, but it also binds you to the ones that remain. Your underwear, in its filth and its stubborn endurance, is proof you've lasted this long. It is a tally mark no one else can see. And as the days fold into each other and the seasons shift without ceremony, you come to understand that this strip of cloth, this cradle of sweat and dirt and skin, is not just a thing you wear. It is the war, distilled to its most private truth, the quiet, unending compromise between what you need and what you can bear. There comes a point when the fabric against your skin stops feeling like a possession and starts feeling like a presence, as if it has learned you, memorized you, claimed you in a way no lover ever could. You can sense it in the morning before you even open your eyes. That quiet, oppressive awareness of something clinging to you, molded perfectly to the shape of your body's most private contours. It is no longer merely what you're wearing. It has become a companion, a jailer, and a parasite all at once. In the stillness, between bursts of noise when the guns rest their throats and the wind seems to hold its breath, you notice the texture more than the sound. The brittle edges where the cloth has stiffened into ridges, the smooth, almost greasy panels worn thin from endless rubbing, the damp spots that never quite dry, because your body never stops producing the heat and moisture they feed on. By then, the smell has reached a stage that can be named with anything as simple as bad or foul. It's layered complex, as if the garment has been marinating in a stew of months long. Human confinement, the metallic undertone of sweat, turned sour, the faint tang of blood, the deep rot of bacteria that have grown bold in the dark. You could almost convince yourself it's the smell of the war itself, distilled and concentrated. Because no matter how far you march, no matter what field or village or ruin you pass through, it clings with the same stubborn intimacy. And you notice how it affects the way you move, not just physically, but mentally. At first, you walked like a man wearing clothes, the fabric following the motion of your legs and hips, moving with you. Now, you move around it. Your gait adjusts to avoid the sharp chafe at the inner thighs. Your steps shorten, so the waistband doesn't saw into your skin. Your posture changes, so the damp patch along your lower back doesn't feel like a cold hand pressed against you. Every shift in your stance is a negotiation, a quiet compromise between discomfort and the bare possibility of relief. You begin to forget what it was like to walk without thinking of what's between you and your uniform. That forgetfulness is dangerous, because once you accept the constant irritation, you also start accepting other degradations without question. The hunger that never quite goes away, the filth under your fingernails, the ring of grime on your neck where a collar used to be clean. You are becoming something else, someone else, the man who wears the same layer day and night and no longer dreams of taking it off. When you're in the company of other soldiers, this strange intimacy becomes shared. You don't talk about it, not directly, but there are glances, subtle movements, a communal understanding in the way men shift in their seats, lean one hip against a wall to ease the burn scratch in a way that's half surreptitious, half unbothered. It's in the pauses in conversation, when someone adjusts their waistband, or the way a joke about catching something can trigger a ripple of laughter that is more bitter than amused. It is not just your skin that is adapting. It is your sense of self in relation to everyone else. You all stink. You all carry your private swamp under your uniforms. And so, paradoxically, the shame dissolves. You stop being embarrassed. You stop thinking in terms of, I smell bad, and start thinking in terms of, this is what we smell like. The line between the individual and the group blurs, and the stink becomes part of your shared identity, a flag no one can see, but everyone can sense. Sometimes, in rare moments of stillness, you can catch the faint memory of how it began. You might be crouched in the corner of a dim shelter, knees drawn up, half dozing, when a draft cuts across you and lifts the odor just enough that your mind flashes back to the first week, when it was still clean enough to touch without hesitation, still soft against the skin, still something you could fold neatly. It's almost a shock to remember, but the memory fades as quickly as it comes, smothered under the pressing reality of what the fabric has become. And there is no way back. You can't undo the weeks of sweat and soil, can't unwear the miles you've marched, can't scrape away the proof of the nights you spent lying in mud that seeped through to your bones. You can only go forward, deeper into the transformation, until the idea of clean is as alien as the idea of safe. The body reacts to this in ways you can't predict. Skin thickens in some places, thins dangerously in others. The creases at your hips darken and take on a faint, perpetual sheen, as if polished by the constant movement of dirty cloth. In the heat, the waistband softens and sags. In the cold, it stiffens and bites. Your body has oils, which once might have kept your skin supple, now work against you, turning the fabric into a sticky film that grips at every move. Sometimes at night, you wake scratching, not from an itch, but from a deep, almost subconscious need to break the contact, to make your skin your own again, if only for a second. But the relief never lasts. The garment reclaims you as soon as you stop moving, and yet you keep it. You keep it because there is no choice, but also because choice itself feels like a luxury you no longer trust. Even if a new pair appeared in front of you, bright, clean, smelling faintly of starch, you'd hesitate. Not because you don't want it, but because changing would feel unsafe. You've worn this one long enough to know its every weakness and cruelty, to know where it will chafe and where it will relent. A new pair might bring new pain, and in war, the devil you know is often the one you cling to. This is the quiet horror of adaptation. You start defending the thing that's hurting you, because it's familiar, because it hasn't killed you yet. In conversations with the self, the kind you have in the hours before dawn, when you read too tired to sleep, you might admit that the filth has become a kind of armor. Not armor that protects you from bullets, but armor against softness, against remembering what comfort feels like. Comfort, after all, is dangerous here. It tempts you to think of home, to think of warm baths and crisp linens, and the absurd ease of peeling off clothes without fear. Those thoughts can undo you faster than a sniper's bullet. They can make you slow, make you careless, make you yearn. So you embrace the discomfort. You wrap yourself in it. You tell yourself it makes you harder, makes you part of the earth you crawl through, part of the war itself. And maybe, in some twisted way, it's true. There are moments when you imagine the end, not the end of the war, not even your own end, but the end of this garment's life. You picture it being tossed into a fire, or left in the dirt to rot, or buried with you if the worst should happen. You think about the relief of never feeling it again, and you wonder if you'd even notice the absence after all this time. Would your skin rejoice? Or would it ache for the strange constant that's been with you through every shell burst, every march, every frozen dawn? That is the cruelty of long deprivation. You begin to miss the thing that oppressed you once it has gone. And perhaps that is the war as final joke, that the first thing you feel in freedom is the absence of the very filth that chained you. By the end of the second month, you've stopped marking time in days or weeks. You measure it instead in the deepening texture of the cloth, in the changing color where sweat has left its mark, in the way the elastic has begun to fray into small, curling threads. Each change is a reminder that you are changing too, not just in the face or in the body, but somewhere deeper, in the part of you that once believed some lines should never be crossed. You've crossed them all now. You live inside the thing you once would have thrown away without thought. And you will keep living in it, because that is what the war demands. And because, in the end, you are not just wearing it, it is wearing you. There is a strange kind of brotherhood born in filth, a fellowship that is not declared with flags or ceremonies, but stitched quietly in the spaces between discomfort and survival. And nowhere is it more tangible than in the secret shared knowledge of the garment each man wears under his uniform. It is not spoken of directly. No one sits around the mess tin fire swapping tailies about the exact condition of the cloth clinging to their hips. But it hovers there unacknowledged, yet undeniable, like the smell in a room you stop noticing until someone new walks in. You read it in body language, the subtle widening of stance when a rash has begun to flame between the thighs. The absent-minded scratching at a waistband, as if trying to remind the skin beneath that it still belongs to a living man, the slow shifting from one buttock to the other, in an attempt to relieve a burn that never quite heals. In these moments, there is no rank, no difference between a boy barely past his 18th birthday and a weathered man with lines carved deep into his face. They are all prisoners of the same cloth, their dignity eroded by the same slow grinding of dirt into skin. The mind follows the body's lead. In the first months, you noticed the smell. In the second, you resented it. In the third, you joked about it with the others. But now it is not a smell anymore. It is simply the air you inhabit. You breathe it without thought, the way a man who has lived too long in the damp ceases to notice the mold in his walls. You would only smell it again if you were torn from it and thrust into a clean world. Then it would rise up, sharp and animal, the scent of something dragged out of its lair. But here, in the war's endless corridors of mud and blood and fatigue, it is the neutral state, the 0 point from which all else is measured. You begin to lose the reflex that recoils from filth. You touch your own body and feel only warmth, texture, the simple proof of being alive. And yet, in some deep chamber of the mind, the one the war has not yet gutted, there is an unease about this surrender. Because if you can stop feeling the filth, what else can you stop feeling? If the body can be taught to live inside a cage without noticing the bars, what will happen when you return to a place without cages? Will you still know how to breathe air that does not belong to a trench? Will you still know how to wear cloth that has not been steeped in the essence of months of fear and exhaustion? The thought is fleeting. You cannot afford to dwell on it, but it passes through you like a draft in a closed room, unsettling in its chill. What you notice more than the smell now is the weight, not that the underwear is heavy in any physical sense. It weighs perhaps no more than when it was issued to you. But in your mind, it is heavy with accumulation, the sediment of time and wear and skin, and the thousand small indignities it has absorbed without release. When you walk, that weight moves with you, reminding you of every mile you have traveled in it. Every hour you have sat motionless while rainwater seeped in and never quite left, every moment when your own body's needs were secondary to the orders of the day. You might be able to shrug off the war's broader philosophies, politics, patriotism, the grand speeches made by men who never dirtied their hands, but you cannot shrug off the private gravity of this cloth. It is yours, and it will remain yours until it disintegrates, and by then, you will have shaped yourself to its absence, so completely that the absence will feel like a wound. This merging with the garment changes the way you think about touch. Once, the thought of bare skin against air would have been pleasant, sensual even. Now, the idea carries a faint edge of threat. To expose yourself, to truly expose yourself, would be to strip away the single most constant thing in your life, the layer that has traveled with you through every fear, every hunger, every narrow escape. It is absurd. You know it is absurd, but there is a whisper inside that says, without it, you might not survive. Not because it protects you from the elements, but because it is the element you have adapted to. To change it now would be like uprooting a tree and expecting it to thrive in new soil. And so you do not change it. You live inside it as you live inside the war, without asking when it will end, without believing in the possibility of relief, without trying to measure the toll it takes. You simply go on, one day bleeding into the next, one step following the other, the waistband digging its familiar arc into your flesh, the cloth holding the shape of your every movement. You become a man who wears the same underwear for months, not because he must, but because he has become the man who does. And in that quiet, irreversible transformation, the war wins another small, invisible victory. There comes a point when the garment stops being a garment and becomes a superstition, and you do not remember exactly when that shift happened, only that it has already taken root by the time you notice yourself thinking of it in ways you would never have allowed in the world before the war. You begin to believe quietly, almost shamefully, that perhaps it has been protecting you, that maybe its stubborn endurance, its refusal to tear away entirely despite everything you've done to it, is the reason you've survived this long. You see other men fall, men who had cleaner clothes, men who'd managed to change somewhere along the line. And some unspoken part of you whispers that perhaps their undoing came because they disrupted whatever thread of luck had been sewn into the cloth they wore next to their skin. It sounds foolish even as you think it, but in a place where bullets and shrapnel choose victims with no logic at all, foolishness becomes as reasonable as anything else. And so you hold on to it, not just because you have no other choice, but because it feels like one of the last things you can control. This decision to keep the same layer against your flesh, unbroken, unchallenged, as if changing it would be a kind of betrayal. You start to notice the way your hands treat it differently than the rest of your clothing. When you strip off your jacket or your shirt, you do it without thought, flinging them aside, letting them fall into the mud without a second glance. But when you adjust the waistband of your underwear, or pull it slightly away from your skin to scratch, there is a certain care in the gesture, almost tenderness. Your fingers know every fray, every thin patch, every ridge where the fabric is folded and hardened, and they navigate those familiar landscapes the way one might touch the face of a loved one in the dark. It is absurd, and you know it, but absurdity is just another thing the war has taught you to cradle without shame. And you are not alone in this quiet reverence. Around the fire, in the dugouts, in the cramped belly of the trucks, you see other men treating theirs with the same strange respect. No one talks about it directly. Superstitions die if spoken too plainly. But you catch the way they handle the waistband as they shift in their sleep, or the way they run a thumb along the hem, as if checking it is still there, still intact. There is a shared understanding, a silent pact, that what you've worn this long is not to be lightly replaced. You've kept it through bombardments, through days of hunger, through nights when you thought you would not see the next dawn. To give it up now would be like giving up a part of yourself that had proven, again and again, it could endure what you endured. Some men even give theirs names, though they never say them aloud. You learn this not because they tell you, but because you hear the murmurs in the half-sleep before dawn, the way a man will mutter something under his breath, a word that makes no sense until you realize he is speaking to the cloth itself, as if it were a comrade who has kept watch through the night. You understand it instinctively because you have caught yourself doing the same, addressing it in your mind during the worst moments, bargaining with it, promising that if it just holds together through this march, through this skirmish, you will see it through to the end. And perhaps you believe that in some way it is bargaining back, that it is holding itself together, not out of accident, but out of loyalty. This strange bond changes the way you think about death. Once, you imagined that if you were to fall, your comrades would remember your face, your voice, perhaps the way you laughed or cursed or carried your pack. Now you suspect they might remember something else, that when they think of you, they will think of the smell and the weight, and the particular way your garment clung to you, as if it had been shaped to your life, and would refuse to fit anyone else. And you find that thought comforting in a way you can't explain, as if the most intimate marker of your existence is not your features or your name, but the worn, stained, unchanging layer that has traveled every step of this road with you. The irony is that the cloth is no longer the same as it was when it was issued. It has absorbed too much sweat, dirt, blood, the oils from your skin, the mold from nights in damp trenches, for any of its original fibers to be untouched. It is as much you as it is fabric now. You think of it sometimes as a shell that has grown around you, the way a pearl grows around a grain of sand. And like a shell, it is both a prison and a protection, fragile in some ways and impossibly strong in others. You imagine, in the quiet spaces between orders, what it would feel like to shed it, to emerge from it the way some creature slips free of an old skin. But you also know you would be naked in more ways than one. You would be shedding not just the cloth, but the months of your life it contains. Months you are not ready to face without a barrier between you and the world. This is why you never join in when someone brags about finally getting a clean pair. You nod, you smile, you might even congratulate them. But inside, you feel something almost like pity. Clean means starting over, and starting over means letting go of the one constant in a world where nothing else holds. It means erasing the proof that you have endured, that you have been here, that you have lived every moment the war could throw at you, without surrendering the one thing that was yours to keep. You do not say this aloud, because it would sound mad to anyone who hasn't lived it. But you see in the eyes of the few who have held on to theirs just as long as you have, that they understand without words. And so you go on, carrying this talisman against your skin, not because you believe it can stop bullets or end the war, but because it is the last witness that never looked away. It has been with you in the mud and the cold, in the moments when you thought your body would give out, in the nights when you prayed for morning, and in the mornings when you wished the night had never ended. It has taken everything you have given it, every drop of sweat, every flake of skin, every trace of yourself that you have left behind, and it has held it without complaint. And in return, it has stayed with you when everything else could be taken. Perhaps when all of this is over, you will burn it, or bury it, or keep it in some hidden drawer where no one else will ever see. Perhaps you will never speak of it again. But you know, in the private part of yourself, that no one else can reach, that this cloth has been more than just something you wore. It has been the shape of your endurance, the shadow of your survival, the silent partner in every mile and every heartbeat. And you will carry it, in one form or another, for the rest of your life. At first, the habit of keeping the same pair was born of necessity, but by now, somewhere in the deep marrow of this war, it has hardened into ritual, the kind that feels dangerous to break, even if logic whispers that it is only cloth and superstition. You've been offered chances, rare fleeting moments when a resupply stumbled its way to your position, or when a village washhouse lay abandoned with a bucket and a line still standing. But each time some hand inside you, colder and surer than thought, held you back. You told yourself the water was too cold, the soap too scarce, the time too short, but the truth was quieter, more superstitious. You feared that stripping off this one last skin would strip away whatever invisible thread it kept you alive through shellfire and sickness and the unending grind of mud under your boots. And you've seen it happen, or you've convinced yourself you have, how a man would accept a fresh pair, shrugging into the novelty of it with a grin, only to catch a bullet within the week, or take a shard of steel through the ribs the next morning. The cause and effect make no sense to the reasonable mind. But the mind that survives here is not the reasonable one. It is the one that learns to bargain with shadows and signs, and your shadow says, keep it no matter what. So the avoidance becomes an art, a practiced choreography of excuses and quiet refusals. When the quartermaster calls out that there's spare clothing, you busy yourself with something, cleaning your weapon, fixing a strap, tending to a fire that does not need tending. When others strip down by the river in summer, their pale skin flashing like a reminder of some lost civilian fragility, you linger at the edge smiling, saying you'll guard the packs, letting the cool water pass you by, because the cost of immersion feels higher than the comfort it might buy. And even when you sleep, there's a subtle ritual in the way you shift under your blanket, careful never to peel the waistband too far from your skin, as if loosening it too much might tempt fate to loosen its grip on you. It is absurd, yes, but here absurdity is the scaffolding that holds you up. In time, the others notice. Not in a mocking way. Mockery would require the kind of energy no one here wastes, but in a glancing sidelong awareness, the way one notes a man's favored route through a minefield, or the way he grips his rifle before a charge. They may not speak of it, but they remember. And some of them, quietly, begin to mirror you. At first, it is only the ones who already kept theirs longer than most, the ones who also flinched at the sight of new issue cloth. But slowly, as weeks press forward and the war thins everyone's boundaries, a few more join, each carrying their own private reasoning, their own stitched-together belief that maybe, just maybe, what keeps you alive is not bravery or skill or luck, but the refusal to let go of the one constant pressed closest to your body. These unspoken rituals spread in subtle ways. A man will offer to trade boots, but never underwear. Someone will barter cigarettes for a length of rope or a spare canteen, but will laugh softly and shake his head when you ask about the extra pair you've seen stuffed into his pack. And there are the men who, when finally cornered by circumstance, when lice or infection make wearing the same pair impossible, will perform the change like a funeral rite, slow and solemn, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. They will sometimes bury the old pair, marking the spot with a stone or a scrap of wood, not because they think they'll return for it, but because to discard it carelessly would feel like tempting a jealous god. You find yourself weaving tiny ceremonies into your own days, though you'd never call them that. The way you check the seams each morning, running your fingers over the familiar topography of wear before you pull on your trousers. The way you always adjust it twice, before a march, once before the first step, and once again after the second, as if that second adjustment locks something in place for the miles ahead. The way you fold your body around it at night, curling to keep it warm against you, even when the air is hot and still. These are not choices anymore. They are reflexes, and they are as much a part of your survival as eating or breathing. And when you imagine the war ending, it is not victory parades or speeches you see first. It is the moment you finally remove it. The moment your skin meets the air without that barrier for the first time in months. But even in the fantasy, there is hesitation. You see yourself holding it in your hands, feeling its weight or lack of it, and you cannot decide what to do. Part of you wants to burn it instantly, to watch the smoke carry away every long night and blistering day it has known. But another part wants to fold it carefully, to keep it hidden like a relic, because what if it was true? What if all along it was not just cloth, but a charm, a shield, a silent agreement between you and whatever forces decide who lives and who does not? To destroy it might feel like spitting on the only pact that never broke. And so the ritual deepens, as rituals always do when their origin is lost to memory, and their practice becomes the only thing that feels certain. You stop asking yourself why. You stop explaining it in your head. You simply keep it, and keep wearing it, and keep moving through each day, as if the act of not changing it is part of the bargain that allows you to reach the next one. And perhaps it is. Or perhaps it isn't. But here, where reason has been replaced by survival, the line between the two has worn as thin as the waistband at your hip. At some point, without fanfare or even conscious decision, the ritual stops being something you do and starts being something you are. It becomes part of the way you think of yourself, a quiet badge worn beneath the uniform, invisible to everyone but yourself and those who have lived the same slow corrosion. You are no longer simply a soldier in a war. You are one of the men who kept the same garment from the first weeks through the thick churn of seasons, who wore it until the body beneath reshaped to match its wear, until the cloth and the flesh seemed bound by some private covenant. And in the strange, twisted arithmetic of survival, this stubbornness becomes a kind of defiance. The officers can dictate your route. The war can dictate your chances. The weather can dictate your suffering. But this one thing, this one silent choice, is yours alone. You carry it like a hidden medal, pinned not to your chest for others to see, but pressed close against your skin, where only you can feel its weight. This identity is not spoken aloud, not traded in words. It is carried in the glance you exchange with another man when the rare subject of clean clothes comes up, the flicker of recognition, when you both know you have chosen not to take the offer. It's there in the way you move, the subtle adjustments of stance and gait that mark someone who has been living inside the same inch of cloth for longer than most can stand. There is no club, no ceremony, yet you know who belongs. And with that belonging comes a strange pride, not the kind that swells the chest, but the kind that sits deep in the bones, like the knowledge that you have endured something others could not. In the early months, it was the war that defined you. Now, this choice defines how you move through the war. You start to think of yourself as different from the ones who take what is given without question, the ones who swap their layers when the opportunity appears. You do not see them as weak. There is no room for that judgment here. But you see them as something else, something not quite your own kind. You have narrowed your tribe to those who understand what it means to hold on, to the one piece of the battlefield that is entirely yours to live. Inside it until the idea of removing it feels as alien as leaving your own shadow behind. And in this narrowing, the garment takes on the strange gravity of a totem. You catch yourself thinking of it not in terms of comfort or function, but as a symbol of what you've become. The man who doesn't flinch, the man who doesn't yield to the temptations of ease, the man who accepts that there is no clean in war, only degrees of dirt you choose to carry. Sometimes you wonder if this identity will follow you beyond the lines, if you'll find yourself, years from now, back in some quiet place, clinging to other worn-out things because the thought of replacing them feels like breaking faith with the person you were here. The idea doesn't frighten you as much as it should. Instead, it feels like a tether, a way to keep from losing yourself entirely to the soft, treacherous world you used to inhabit. There are moments when this identity surfaces in strange ways. A man nearby will complain about the smell in the dugout, and you will feel an almost smug stillness inside, knowing you've long passed the point where smell matters. Someone will fret about a rash after only a week in the same clothes, and you will all feel the quiet satisfaction of having gone months without letting that kind of discomfort push you into action. These are small, private victories, but they reinforce the sense that you have mastered something, not the war itself, but the art of existing within it without letting it strip away the last of your autonomy. And mastery, even over something as humble and grimy as a pair of underwear, is not nothing here. But it is not all pride. There's a darker edge to it, a recognition that this identity is built as much from surrender as from defiance. You've surrendered the memory of what it feels like to be clean, surrendered the instinct to recoil from your own body's residue, surrendered the part of yourself that once believed certain lines should never be crossed. You've crossed them and kept walking, and the garment is both the proof and the product of that crossing. This is the war's sleight of hand. It lets you keep a piece of yourself, but only by reshaping that piece into something it can use. And you wonder, in the quiet hours, whether the pride you feel is just another form of captivity. Still, you hold on to it. Not because you are blind to the compromise, but because you've learned that survival here is not about purity. It is about choosing the terms of your corruption. You did not choose the mud, the hunger, the arbitrary cruelty of orders shouted from far away, but you chose this. You chose to keep what others would discard. You chose to live inside the same skin until it no longer felt foreign. And in a place where almost every choice is taken from you, that matters. It matters enough to shape how you see yourself when you catch your reflection in a shard of glass or a pool of stagnant water. You are the man who kept it. And for now, that is enough. Because in the end, this identity is not about the garment at all. It is about the refusal to let go of the one thing you can still claim entirely, even if it is tattered and filthy and worn nearly to nothing. It is about the quiet resistance of saying, "This is mine, and I will decide when to give it up." It is about carrying that decision in secret, under layers of uniform and dirt, through every mile and every night, until the day comes when the war is over or when you are. And until that day, you will keep it, because keeping it has become who you are. There comes a point when the cloth stops being a garment and stops even being a symbol. It becomes a soul you wear a second. Silent version of yourself, stitched from everything you've endured, a twin that has followed you through every hour of this long and unending exile. You feel it more than you feel your own shadow, because your shadow disappears when the light changes. But this presence has stayed with you through every weather, through darkness and flame, through nights when the sky seemed to breathe smoke, and days when the air was too still to carry sound. You no longer think of it as dirty or worn, because those words belong to a world of comparison. And here there is no clean, there is no new, there is only this permanent layer that has absorbed you in return for letting you keep going. You move inside it the way a hermit crab moves inside its shell, not thinking of it as separate, not imagining stepping out of it, knowing that if you were torn from it now, you would feel raw, exposed, and incomplete in a way that has nothing to do with modesty and everything to do with survival. It is strange to realize how much of your memory has been archived into this second skin. There are parts of the war you no longer recall clearly in your mind, the exact sequence of certain days, the names of villages that burned behind you, but you can trace them in the shifting map of its fabric. This patch of stiffened weave along the hip belongs to the week you lay in flooded trenches, your body a sluice gate for rain that would not stop. That faded, almost silvery abrasion along the thigh is from the long march through the high grass in late summer, when the blades cut you until the blood soaked through and dried in the heat. The faint, stubborn dark at the waistband is from the week you had no water at all, when your sweat was the only thing your body could give, and it gave without mercy. Every thread is a line in a history you've stopped telling yourself in words. If someone tore it from you now, they would be taking your only unbroken record. And because it is your record, it has learned your silences. You never speak to the others about the nights when you lay still and let your mind unravel to the rhythm of your own heartbeat, counting time in the heat trapped under the cloth. You never tell them how in the rare moments when you are alone, you sometimes run your hand slowly over the inside of the waistband, not in search of anything, not even comfort, but as if making sure your ghost is still there. It is not sentimentality. Sentiment is a currency that has no use here. It is a kind of roll call. You are here. It is here. And as long as those two facts remain, the rest can follow. There are times in the fevered borderlands between sleep and waking, when you feel as though it moves with its own will, tightening slightly at the waist when danger is near, loosening when the air is safe enough to breathe deeply. You tell yourself this is madness, and maybe it is, but madness here is no more or less than the adaptation of a mind refusing to break. If you must imagine a guardian to walk with you, better it be one that is already bound to you by touch, one that has taken on your scent, your shape, and your scars. You begin to realize you no longer fear its decay. Once, the thought of it tearing away into uselessness filled you with the same unease as dreaming of your own skin peeling off. Now, you know that if it fails, it will do so only after you have passed whatever unseen finish line the war has laid for you. If you die wearing it, It will go into the ground with you, sealing the story whole. If you live to remove it, it will mean you have survived enough to face the dangerous luxury of clean fabric. Either way, the ending feels less like loss and more like completion. And yet, under that acceptance, there is a current of something deeper, the recognition that the man who will one day take it off will not be the man who first put it on. It has shaped you, not just in the calluses it has pressed into your skin, or the way it has taught your muscles to move, but in the way it has altered your sense of self. You are no longer a body wearing clothes. You are a body wearing a memory, and memory is heavier than any fabric. You suspect that when you finally peel it away, you will feel lighter and heavier at once. Light from the loss of its constant presence, heavy from the sudden return of air on skin that has forgotten how to be bare. Sometimes you imagine that moment, not as a cleansing, but as a parting. You will stand somewhere, maybe in a barracks far from the front, maybe in some quiet field where the war's noise is only an echo, and you will hold it in your hands, limp and weightless now that it is no longer wrapped around your living heat, and you will not know what to do. Burn it, bury it, keep it. Every option will feel wrong, because all of them would be final. You will feel the urge to fold it back into itself, to hide it away like something sacred, not for display, but for safekeeping, as if it could still be called upon in some future moment, when you need to remember not just the war, but the version of yourself who survived it. Until then, you keep it close. You keep it like a second soul, stitched in cotton and dirt, bound by sweat instead of thread. You walk in it, sleep in it, fight in it, live in it, and though you would never admit it aloud, you know you will also die in it if that is where the road ends. Because here, where everything else has been taken or given conditionally, it is the only thing that has never left. You never failed you, never pretended to be anything other than what it is, a witness that does not look away, a shadow that touches you, a soul you can feel with your hands. There comes a moment, not a day, not an hour, just a slow turning of the tide inside you, when you no longer feel as though you are wearing it at all, because there is no you in it anymore, only the thing you have both become together. It is not cloth clinging to skin, not even the second soul you once thought it was. It is the skin, and you are the memory inside it. You move, and it moves not with you, but as you, like a muscle or a shadow, obeying without delay, without question, without any hint of separation. You cannot say when this began, but you know it must have been gradual. The way rivers carve their beds so slowly that one day the water docently flow through the land. It is the land. And now, when you think of yourself, you do not picture your face, your hands, your body at all. You picture the shape it has given you, the darkened arcs, the faded patches, the hardened seams that map out not where you've been, but what you've survived. The others are beginning to blur too. When you pass another man, you no longer see him as a separate self contained in his uniform. You see the echo of his own second skin beneath it, and in your mind, the man and his cloth are indistinguishable two halves of the same worn truth. Sometimes you imagine that if the war stripped away all outer layers, you would still recognize each other instantly, not by the features of the face, but by the way the inner garment had shaped itself to the life it carried. There would be no mistaking yours, nor his, nor any man's, because each would bear the unmistakable contours of its owner's private war. And perhaps that is the final merging, not just man and cloth, but men and each other, the lines between individual suffering, dissolving into a single body stitched from thousands of hidden, unwashed skins. In the heat, you feel it breathing with you, not because there is any air in it, but because the warmth inside is so complete, it could be mistaken for a living thing's own pulse. In the cold, it seems to grip you tighter, as though closing itself around your core to keep you from breaking. You know, rationally, it has no will, no thought, but reason no longer holds dominion here. Out here, what you believe shapes what is, and what is shapes you in return. And so you believe, if only in the marrow of your bones, that it has learned you in ways no living soul has, and that knowledge is mutual. You have memorized its weight, even in the dark, its exact position on your body at any given moment, the places where it pulls, and the places where it rests. If someone were to blindfold you and strip it away, then hand it back to you among 1,000 others, you would know it by touch alone, the way you would know your own heartbeat in a room full of drums. The dreams come more often now. Dreams where you are not in a trench or on a march, not even in a world you recognize, but somewhere formless, lit from nowhere, and you are only this second skin, drifting through a place where there is no war, and yet you still carry its marks. In these dreams, there is no desire to remove it, no shame in its smell or its weight, only the sense that to be without it would be to forget everything that ever mattered. You wake from these dreams with a strange calm, the kind you've learned to distrust here, because calm is often the silence before something shatters. Still you hold on to the feeling, letting it sit under your ribs as you move through the day, as if the dream has reminded you that your identity is not in your name or your face, but in this continuous unbroken contact between what you are and what has kept you. It changes how you feel pain. The raw chafing, the burn of salt in open skin, the constant low throb in the creases of your body, all of it has dulled into something like background music, the constant drone you stop hearing until it stops, and you realize the silence is worse. You no longer flinch at the sting. Instead, you find a strange reassurance in it, because the pain is proof the merging is still complete, that the boundary between you and it hasn't been breached. You dread the idea of clean, not because you fear water or fabric, but because you fear what would be washed away with the dirt, the weeks of holding on, the thin, invisible threads tying you to the version of yourself that refused to surrender this one last thing. And sometimes, when the night is long and the cold sinks into the marrow of your bones, you think of the day it will finally part from you. Will it slip away in death, loosening its grip in the stillness after breath? Will it be peeled from you by someone's living hands, their faces strangers, their eyes seeing only rags where you see history? Or will you, impossibly, survive long enough to take it off yourself, folding it with the same care you would give to the body of a fallen comrade? In those moments, you realize there is no ending that will feel right, because endings are for things that are separate from you. And this is not. You do not wear it. It is the vessel in which you move through this war, and without it, you are unsure if you would move at all. So you keep it close, tighter than ever, not from vanity or stubbornness, but because the line has vanished completely. You have stopped being a man wearing underwear for months on end. You are now the thing that happens when cloth and man refuse to part, when survival is measured not just in heartbeats, but in the endurance of something that began as an object and became the body's own shadow. And you know, with the kind of certainty that does not need proof, that whatever happens next, whether you live, whether you die, there will never again be a version of you that can step into clean fabric and be untouched. That version is gone, and in its place stands this, a life shaped and sealed inside the only skin the war could not strip away. There is a quiet truth that creeps in during the longest nights, the ones where the war feels endless and the cold is not a thing outside of you, but a slow, patient tide moving through your bones. You begin to understand that this second skin you've carried, this unbroken layer of cloth and sweat and memory, will outlast you. You might survive the war. You might even live long enough to feel air that is not laced with gunpowder or rot, but you will never outlive what this garment has made of you. It will survive in the way you walk, in the way you fold your arms when you stand still, in the way your body no longer trusts the idea of clean fabric against bare flesh. Even if you burn it, even if you bury it, there will be a ghost of it stitched into the muscle memory of your movements, and you will feel it, sometimes like a phantom, limb in absence, so heavy it becomes a presence. And that is the cruel genius of it. It has not simply covered you. It has rewritten you until there is no you before it that you can return to. It is not only you who will carry this forward. You have seen men fall, sudden and final, and you have watched their bodies be lifted away, the rest of their gear gathered for whatever bureaucratic tally will follow. But the garment remains with them, taken off only when some distant, clean-handed functionary decides it must be done, and you know those hands will never understand what they're touching. They will see only fabric, stiff with age and filth, a thing to be discarded or burned without ceremony. They will not know that in holding it, they are holding the very shape of a man's survival, the final layer of his will to endure, the silent witness to every heartbeat that carried him this far. And this, more than death itself, is what unsettles you, that something so intimate could be touched by strangers who will never know its name, who will never feel the weight it carried. You think sometimes about how it began, that first day you pulled it on without thought, a piece of issued clothing like any other. If you had known then that it would become your last constant, would you have treated it differently? Or would knowing its fate have ruined the strange bond that only time and suffering can forge? The truth is, it did not need your awareness to become what it is now. It only needed the unbroken chain of days and nights in which you both endured, and in which neither of you left the other behind. You might call that loyalty, though loyalty is too human a word for something that has no mind, no choice, only persistence. But perhaps that is the most honest kind of loyalty, not a promise spoken aloud, but a fact proven again and again simply by staying. And so you begin to feel a kind of preemptive mourning, not for yourself, but for the moment you will inevitably be separated. If it happens in life, it will be your choice, and that will make it harder, because to choose to part from, it will feel like betraying the pact you've both kept without speaking. If it happens in death, it will be the choice of someone else, and that will make it easier in the way that all inevitable endings are easier, because you will not be here to see it. But either way, the parting will be permanent, and you know there will be no replacing it. Because it is not the object itself you will lose, but the version of yourself that only exists inside it. Without it, you will be someone else entirely, someone who may not remember how to live without the weight, the smell, a constant reminder of what you've been through. In the small hours when the war has gone momentarily quiet and your mind drifts into places you cannot visit in daylight, you find yourself wondering whether it has been protecting you not in the mystical way you once half believed, but in the way a wound protects itself with a scab. Maybe it has kept you from feeling the full sting of the world outside. Maybe it has dulled you enough to endure things you would not have survived raw. And if that is true, then parting with it will not be freedom. It will be like peeling away the one thing keeping the deeper pain from bleeding out. This thought frightens you more than you want to admit, because it means that even peace could feel like a kind of injury. And yet, you know the day will come, because nothing, not even the most stubborn relic of survival, can outlast the turning of time. When it does, you hope you will be somewhere, still enough to acknowledge it, to hold it one last time, and let the memories flow back without resistance. The marsh, the nights in the mud, the moments of blind terror, the unexpected bursts of laughter, the unbearable silences. You hope you will have the presence of mind to say goodbye, even if only in thought, and to thank it for being the one thing that never abandoned you, even when you had every reason to abandon yourself. And if you can do that, maybe you can step into whatever comes next without feeling entirely unmoored. Because the truth you have come to understand in the slow erosion of months, is that you are not just a man who wore the same underwear through the war. You are the man who became it, and who let it become him. You are the man who learned that survival sometimes looks like defiance, sometimes looks like surrender, and sometimes looks like a thin, stained strip of cloth holding together not just your body, but the part of your soul that refused to let go. And whatever history chooses to remember about this war, That part will remain yours alone, as private and unshareable as the layer between you and the world, the one that no one else can ever truly touch. In the end, when the guns go silent and the air stops tasting of iron, when the sky above you feels less like a ceiling and more like something you can step into, there will be no sudden shedding of the weight you've carried, not the weight in your pack, not the weight in your bones, and not the weight of that second skin that has been with you longer than anything else in this war. People will look at you and think they see a man returning, but what they see is only the outline. The truth is still underneath, clinging to you in threads that have long since given up their original color. And it will not be their fault that they cannot understand. It is impossible to explain to someone who has never lived inside the same strip of cloth for months, never felt it record every breath, every shiver, every moment when the line between giving up and holding on was so thin you could barely tell which side you stood on. They will ask about the battles, about the places you've been, about the things you've seen, but they will never think to ask about the one thing that has never left you, the one thing that has survived every shell and every winter and every night you thought you might not wake from. And you will not offer it, because to speak of it is to diminish it, to risk making it small in the ears of someone who cannot feel its weight the way you do. So you will keep it, at least for a while. You will take it off, yes, because there is a part of you that longs for the feel of air on skin, the shock of cold water, the strangeness of fabric that does not know you yet, but you will not throw it away. You will fold it, not neatly but carefully, the way one might fold a flag or a letter, and you will put it somewhere no one else will think to look. And when you close that drawer, or that box or that trunk, it will feel less like storing a piece of clothing, and more like closing a chapter that has been written directly onto your body. In the quiet that follows, you will stand there with your bare skin prickling and realize that you are both lighter and heavier than you were before. Lighter because you have let go of the constant grip of it. Heavier because now you must carry it in your memory, where it cannot be adjusted or shifted or eased. It can only be remembered. And the remembering will not always be gentle. There will be nights, far from the front, when you wake with the phantom weight of it around your waist, your hand moving to adjust it before you realize it is no longer there. There will be moments when the smell of damp cloth in a summer rain, or the creak of worn seams, will pull you back so sharply you have to steady yourself against the nearest wall. And there will be times when you will find yourself holding it again, long after you thought you were done with it, your fingers tracing the hardened edges, the worn thin panels, the frayed line where the waistband began to surrender. You will not be thinking of the war in those moments. You will be thinking of survival, and of the strange, silent companion that saw you through it when nothing else could. One day, someone will find it. Maybe a son, maybe a daughter, maybe no one who knows your name. They will turn it over in their hands, frowning at the stiffness, the stains, the smell that will never entirely wash away, and they will wonder why you kept it. They will not know that it is the closest thing to an honest record of what you were, that the dirt in its fibers is not filth but proof, that its endurance is the truest measure of your own. They will think it useless, and in their world, they will be right. But you will know, even if you are not there to say it, that this was the one thing in the war that never lied to you, never left you, never pretended to be clean when it wasn't. And maybe that is the final truth of it, that in a war where everything is uncertain orders, loyalties, even the ground beneath your feet, the filthiest thing you own can also be the most faithful. That a strip of cloth meant for nothing more than modesty could become the anchor that kept you from drifting into the kind of madness you could not return from. That it could teach you something about endurance no medal or speech ever could. And perhaps, if you let it, could also teach you about the kind of endings that are not victories or defeats, but simply the quiet moment when two things that have carried each other as far as they can finally set each other down. So if you are here listening, If you have walked this long road with me, you know now why this story could never be told in dates and places and names. It is not a story about a war. It is a story about the space between skin and cloth, about the way something so small can carry something so vast. And when you close your eyes tonight, I hope you think about what you carry closest to you, about what has shaped itself to you over time, about what you would choose to keep if everything else was taken. Because in the end, when all the uniforms are burned and all the rifles are rusted, when the last witness has fallen silent, it might not be the grand, shining things that hold your story. It might be the one small, stubborn thing that never let you go. And if tomorrow you come back, maybe I will tell you another story. Not about battles or borders, but about the quiet truths we live inside, the ones no history book will ever print. Until then, take a moment, here in this stillness, to feel whatever second skin you carry. And ask yourself, if it had to, would it survive the war of your life with you? Would it remember you when you are gone? Or would it, like this one, cling to you until the very last breath, not because it has to, but because it cannot imagine itself without you?